And we're live. Welcome back to another Corona Geek, where we talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and today we're going to continue our conversation around consulting tips for app developers. If you're thinking about becoming a consultant, maybe doing some side jobs as part of your, expand your kitty, your revenue stream, or maybe you want to do something on the side. Somebody's asked you to do something for them, and you're thinking about doing it. Then you want to tune into what we're going to have to share here, because everybody on the panel here has experience in one way or another with consulting. And if you haven't had a chance, go back and watch the previous Hangout, number 137, where we actually kicked off this topic and gave out a bunch of tips there as well. So in addition to that, though, we are joined by Daniel Bittencourt from DigiTen Studios, and he's going to throw in on the conversation with us as well about the consulting, but he's also going to share with us some insights into how DigiTen got started. And also we're going to talk about their brand new app, Dig Away, which, if you hadn't played already, is available on iOS and is a fantastic app. It's got lots of fine details, and it's like playing a cartoon. I've said more than one occasion I love playing games that are kind of like playing a cartoon, and Dig Away is fantastic. So we'll have a link in the show notes for that. Go check it out. But you can also, I think you can just Google that, right? You just say, like Dig Away iOS. I mean, it pops right up.
Yeah, it'll show up. We got a decent amount of coverage during launch week and a little after. So. Awesome.
Well, thanks for being here, Daniel. I appreciate it. And we also got your partner in crime there. So thanks for being here. We appreciate it. And then also we're going to talk with Dr. Brian Burton down in Abilene. Mm-hmm. And we got Ed Marino from roaminggamer.com. And then we've got Sergey Ler from spiralcodestudio.com. And then Steven is joining us from the backside of a thumbprint on his webcam or something. I don't know what's going on there. But hey, Steven, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we covered last time. Just so you know, like I said, 137. You can find all the Hangouts over at youtube.com/coronageek, and 137 was our kickoff of this conversation about app contracting tips or app development contractor tips, and we talked about screening clients, engaging projects, tracking hours, and billing clients. I mean, it was a great conversation. I think everybody here was excited about the details of it. So we definitely want to pick that up again today. And then if you haven't checked out Hangout 136, we actually started a series we were going to do, or we are doing, a new game development series where we're creating a memory matching game, and we're walking through the whole entire process. So we kind of got sidetracked a little bit by this whole developer contractor conversation, but we're going to get back on track with that probably next week. So if you're wondering what the heck happened to the game development series, it's still in the mix, and we're just taking a little short detour. And let's see, I'm just looking at the notes here. Oh, for April, we are also playing Catch App's Bounce. So I don't know if you guys have started doing that. There's been several people who have provided their high scores over at facebook.com/coronageek. So if you haven't done that already, here's what you need to do. Basically, check the show notes for the app links. There's two versions there, either iOS or Android. Download it, play it. Get the highest score you can, take a screenshot, and then submit it over at facebook.com/coronageek. At the end of the month, we're going to pick a winner, and that winner will get a $50 gift card. So it's not that hard, and there's the upside to it is you get to play games and actually hopefully win something. So have you guys played that game yet? Have you played Bounce?
Not yet.
He's shaking his head. Sergey hasn't played it. Somebody mentioned that they felt like the ads were a little spammy. Ed, what do you think about that? Have you? Just because they're so close to the.
Go ahead.
Just because they're like so close to the tap region, they kind of pop in like you're.
Yeah, I feel like that. I don't like anything where they put the ads right down where you're naturally putting your fingers. That's a cheat.
Yeah. You think so?
Yeah. I think not so good.
It seems a bit cheap, right? Like a cheap trick. But you also have to understand sort of the developer side is that it's so hard to make money on mobile that people try to get every opportunity and sort of maximize across all their different options.
No, I know where that motivation to put it there is coming from. It's just asked the question as a consumer. So turning off my developer brain. As a consumer, I don't like it.
Right.
And there has to be better ways to do it in order to balance out both sides, right? It's not an ideal solution.
The ideal solution is that we leave behind freemium, and that'd
be nice.
But
but that's sort of the developer talking, ignoring the market and what people actually want. They want to play free games.
Yeah.
Well, hell with them.
We're talking to developers here.
I take it you have your developer hat back on there, Ed.
Whoa, I better turn off my microphone and my camera. I think I feel comfortable here. 2 minutes into the show, I'm already cursing.
Well, that's good. But for anybody who hasn't played Bounced, I mean, it lends itself to it. I mean, you're continually tapping on the screen, trying to make the character go to the next level, and then the monetization mechanisms that are available are just to either show interstitial ads or show banner ads or whatever. I mean, you just kind of. It seems like maybe it's not so much as an intention to fool the consumer as it is just the way that the game mechanic goes with the monetization. Maybe I'm being.
Well, and I had that problem with the game from last month, that I would be swiping and slashing to move the dot through the maze, and I would die, and I was still swiping, and I would hit an ad.
The ad that comes up immediately, so you hit it?
Yes.
The other trick technique, bring up the ad right away after they die, so they click it.
Yes.
That comes from Flappy Bird.
Yeah.
So that's what I first saw.
That's how Flappy Bird made so much money. It's
See, I don't know. I think Flappy Bird had a bigger, deeper meaning in life. I think it really was there to
So you must be one of those people that write comments on their app. It seems like every other review is like this really long review about how incredible the game is.
Yeah. I don't exactly. I don't understand those.
Those are known as paid reviews.
Paid reviews, right? All right. Well, hey, let's talk about a game that's a lot of fun. That doesn't. Well, we'll talk about the monetization here in a minute, but it doesn't have those ads and stuff like that. So let's talk about Dig Away. So Daniel, give us a little bit of background. I mean, tell us about DigiTen Studios. Tell us about your personal experience. Let's find out. Who you guys are.
Sure. So I'm Dan. Davi is my partner in crime over there. He's got the mic muted. He was the artist on Dig Away. I did the development and sort of led the game design. But we're a fairly new studio, and this was our first game. We had been previously working in different places. I lived in Canada for a while. I was working in the games industry there. And we both got to a point where we wanted to kind of take a bit of a risk, but also a next step in our career. And we decided to open up a studio and try to, make games on our own. And so, part of our studio's history has a lot to do with the talk, today's talk about outsourcing and about contract work, because we sort of self-funded development by taking up contract work. And so we would dedicate around half of our time to contracts and then the other half development. And it was really tough. I think it's very difficult to do that successfully. And you also have to be very careful about what you're actually doing for contract work, because you always want to sort of keep your company's objectives and goals sort of in mind. And if those contracts are helping you get there, that's good. But if they're not, it can actually distract you. You can lose time. But then we launched Dig Away last month. It's it's a puzzle game. It's a cartoon puzzle game. And there's a lot of action and thinking involved, and we think it's a fairly interesting balance. And the premise is you can basically move to left, right, and down. You're always digging and looking for treasure, but you can never go back up. So you have to sort of plan your routes, your descent into the mines, and to make sure you don't miss anything, and later on to make sure you don't get caught in any traps or by any enemies. And so the game's been out for about a month and a half maybe, and we got a lot of views. We got featured by Apple pretty much all over the world, and I think within like the first week we had over 1 million downloads, which is awesome.
So did you guys have like a master plan for getting featured and stuff like that? I mean, did that happen to you, or did you like sort of take steps to make it happen?
A bit of both. Like we got fortunate enough to meet people from the Brazilian App Store here in Brazil, and so we sort of fostered a relationship with the App Store director, the Brazilian App Store director. And he kind of guided us through maybe the last quarter of development, and we were just kind of talking to him, and he was sort of giving us some ideas and some goals. Like he set out the March deadline. He's like, this is a good spot for you guys to launch, and he could feature it in Brazil, but he could also ask everybody else to try to feature it. But then it's up to every App Store director. But it worked out, so I think we made it. We were for a few days, right? It's definitely not something that stabilizes that way, but we were like the 60th most downloaded app globally, I think.
I think when it seems really obvious that when a game is well done, very tight, the concept is very clean, stuff like that, they don't have any problem featuring those apps. It's just a matter of...
Yeah, we worked a lot on it. We put a lot of polish in it. David did an awesome job with the art. It looks great.
So let's talk about that for just a minute. I mean, like I said before, it seems like it almost plays like a cartoon, and when there's all these little fine details, like when one of the things is when the main character moves over on top of a dirt pile, that dirt pile gives away a little bit. It changes shape, like he's standing on it now, so he's squishing it down. So can you talk about those types of details? I mean, was that just iteration or like inspiration, or how did you guys come up with that?
I think it's definitely a bit of both. It was a passion project for us, so we were always looking to kind of fill it with a lot of love and all the details. Specifically the dirt was Davi's idea to make it squash and bounce when you got off of it. It was funny because we were kind of reskinning some of the art, so we had just made changes to the basic tile, which is the dirt tile. And then as part of the redesign, as he was redrawing the tile, he saw an opportunity to do this. And at first I was like, oh, it's just extra sprite frames and it's something, so it doesn't really impact the game design, so why are we doing it, right? But in the end, everybody notices it, and it's crazy how little details like that really kind of show through,
Yeah, I almost feel it sounds silly, but you almost feel more endeared to the character, right? Because I don't know, it just has a more natural, organic, tactile kind of feel to it, and you just feel like it makes sense. Whereas if it wasn't there, I'm not sure that I'd be able to identify it and say, oh, look, the ground didn't move. But yeah, when it's there, then you're like, oh, he feels like a real little character. He feels like, I don't know, he feels real,
Yeah, absolutely. I think when everything comes together, you get a lot of little things that sort of give you a bit of credibility, right, to what you're looking at and what you're seeing. So there's a lot of like little effects and little things the creatures do, and I think they all kind of add up, and it really sells everything, right?
So you said you worked in the games industry before David did the artwork. I mean, was it hard to collaborate in that way? I mean, how give us some insight as to team-wise. How do you guys kind of share your ideas and then execute on them?
So I guess just to give a bit of context, we actually work from different cities. The studio was founded in the city I'm in, but we're both co-owners, and he works from another city, so we're always on Skype. We're always using either TeamViewer or Skype to share screens, and most of our work is done over the internet. Every once in a while, we'll take a trip to each other's cities and sort of hammer down and do like a sprint or do like get a milestone done, and then we'll come back and sort of rest it off. But that's pretty much how we work, and I think that we just have really good chemistry for working. I think I think what ends up happening usually is we try to approach it from a game design first kind of point of view, and so I'll be leading that, but more in the form of asking trying to ask the right questions and trying to brainstorm in the right direction, and then once we have some ideas that we both like, then Davi will kind of go out and do the initial art direction pass and draw things up, and then I'll come in. My background's in art as well. I was actually graduated with a BFA in digital arts, and so I have a lot of that foundation of fine arts and all that I can help to kind of polish Davi's work, and so we keep going back and forth until we're both kind of happy with where it's at.
Okay, yeah, because that's good that you said that, because generally the programmer doesn't know how to draw and the artist doesn't know how to program. So the fact that
Can I ask a question, Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have so smooth animation. Have you been using plain sprite sheets, or have you been developing something special for this case? Like, do you have really large sprite sheets, or you use something clever?
Yeah, no, nothing clever, unfortunately. The best of what we do, I guess, is to make sure that we compact everything that we can possibly use on that screen into the fewest number of sprite sheets. That way, the load time might be a little more, but at least the draw calls are fast and things stay light. But we do use mega big sprite sheets. It's part of the reason why our game is over 100 megabytes, unfortunately, and you can't download it off of Wi-Fi. But we're looking to change that. So part of our work right now is actually changing that. And so we're using Spine, for example, and we're trying to transfer a lot of the animations out of sprite sheets into Spine data.
Your game reminds me of another game that works on looking like a cartoon. It's Cuphead. Do you know it?
Which one? Sorry?
It's called Cuphead.
No, I don't. I'm gonna have to write it down. Take a look after.
Okay.
Cup as in like a cup?
Like a cup.
Or,
yes.
Yeah.
Cuphead. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, we'll definitely have to check that out. Do you know who developed that?
No, it's a project that has been kickstarted some time ago. I think it's on Steam, or it will be on Steam.
Okay.
So here's a sample of our sprite sheet, the character. This is how it looks. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Oh, hold on. Let me go. Hold on. Let me highlight that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just answering your question. This is how a sprite sheet looks. This is how we have all the animation of a single character on a sprite sheet looking like this. I don't know if you can see my.
Yeah, in this case, there are some moments in the game where the character is double-sized, usually for HUD moments. So, like in the outfit store or in the victory screen. So, this sheet has a double-sized character just for those screens. So that way we can swap out, just kind of dump one sheet when we're not using it anymore and use the other.
Awesome.
Did you do anything special or interesting to manage your video memory, like what sheets were loaded at any particular time?
Just a lot of, I did have a little module that, would sort of create references to them and keep track of how many different, places we're using that sprite sheet, and then delete it when there was none.
So you did do some management to make sure that you didn't have any dangling references.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that was pretty big to us, and we can still see. That's something that we're trying to work on, because it seems like when people have a lot of other apps open, they could reach a potential moment in the game where it hangs because it doesn't have enough virtual memory. So so that's one of the challenges that we undertook, because it's only Davi and we developed everything, and so we kind of approached it in the easiest way possible and try to get it done first, and now we're kind of going around and polishing things. And
do you plan on go on Android?
Yeah, so when we met the guy from Apple, he was sort of just asking questions about what the game was, and one of the things he said was, is it exclusive? And so obviously we wanted to make a friend here, and so we said, yeah, temporary time, and so that I think maybe helped us get a feature. But we will be releasing it on Android. We're actually reworking a lot of the game's structure. It's very linear right now, and we're looking to change that, and we're also looking to open it up so it's entirely free. I think the paywall, in the end, has been keeping a lot of people from playing the game's content. And we are going to be putting ads in the game. That's something that it currently doesn't have. But like I said, it's tough making money from mobile games, even with over 1.5 million downloads. Like, you can still miss out on a potential to make a decent amount of money on something that you've invested a lot of work in.
So for those who are familiar with your monetization strategy, talk about the paywall for just a second. How does the game work in the game?
So what happened was the game was actually going to be a premium game. It was originally just going to be a pay to download and play. And we sort of got a bit of cold feet going into the launch because there was a potential for the feature, and at the time, we're completely unknown. We're worried that if we don't get featured, no one's really going to check it out. So let's find a way to make it free. We don't have a lot of time. What can we do? And so we decided to make the first world free, and there's 4 worlds, and they kind of get progressively longer. In terms of time played, they have the same amount of levels. And so when you reach the end of that first world, you literally hit a paywall. So we bring up sort of a video animation preview of what's coming up next, and we sort of give you the rundown. And we sell level packs. We sell a bundle, which would be all of the levels, all the worlds all together. And then we also sell the characters' outfits as a shortcut. If you don't want to kind of play the entire game to get enough gold, you can just buy the outfit.
Do you have a statistics how many people have come behind the paywall? How many %?
Yeah, so it's quite funny because if you were to look at the amount of people, like the percentage of people that hit the paywall and then paid, the amount of people that got to the paywall and we were able to monetize them, the percentage is awesome. It's 10%. So that's really good because free is usually you're looking between 1 or 2%. Or less, maybe. But there's a lot of people we lose on the way to the paywall. So when you actually factor everybody that's downloaded the game to everybody that's actually converted, then it's about 1%, a little bit over, but not very much. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So are you trying to make adjustments then to make sure that people get to that point, or are you just, like you say, you're just going to completely change the monetization model?
A little bit of both. We don't want to sort of devalue anybody's purchase and everybody that's already purchased level packs. So there's still a benefit to buying into the levels. But what we're doing is, first of all, we are trying to figure out a way to make it so that the entire game is accessible somehow for free. And the other thing we're trying to do is we're trying to break up how linear the game is, and we want to give a more interesting game loop. Right now it's basically like play a level, beat a level, play the next level, beat the next level. Any point in that chain, if you hit a level that you don't like or that's tough and you're not figuring it out, or if something else shows up, you can drop off very easily, right? Because you don't have a lot of options. Each of the levels are very interesting on their own, and I think that was our biggest, the game's biggest strength is kind of the look and the level design. But we don't do a whole lot to keep you in the game, right? We just let you enjoy the game at your own will. And so I think there's an opportunity there, and we're looking at some pretty interesting things to have a much better game loop with a bit more of choice.
And do you guys plan to make this like your primary focus? Like this is going to be this particular app is kind of like the franchise that you're going to focus on, or are you going to do like a series of apps? Or?
I think that remains to be decided, really. But right now, we're putting all of our energy into this. I think we have a really good game, and I think we can basically make it even better, and then we can launch it to even more people. So I think we still have a really good opportunity, and it's worth investing. And there's been a lot of people that have been playing the game, and they're asking for more worlds and more levels. So there's a demand as well. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the reason I ask is we've had that conversation here before is kind of like, should you, quantity or quality? You know, should you have one app that you focus on exclusively, or should you have multiple apps and just try to, iterate until you have like that big win? But I mean, you guys with 1 million and change download, I mean, you guys have already kind of hit the big win, I think, in those terms, especially as your first app. You know, I don't know if you're saying this is your first app as a group, or if you're first app ever, but it's a fantastic offering either way.
Thank you. This was our first app as a company. Davi had previously worked with mobile. I personally hadn't. I came from Microsoft. I was on Kinect and on Xbox, and sort of moved on to something a little more, maybe not casual, because Kinect is kind of casual, but I guess smaller scope.
Gotcha. Yeah, being able to wake up in the morning and you're the one making the decisions as to how you're gonna spend your day. Okay, well these are all great. I mean, does anybody in the panel have any other questions? I want to leave time for.
How long have you been working on the game?
Oh, that was one of my questions.
That's a good one.
So we've been working a fairly long time on it. It was altogether to launch was just about 2 years. We had about 2 to 3 months in the beginning that was long distance from Canada to Brazil. I was in Canada, so it was Pacific time, and so we'd get into those 6-hour differences, anywhere between 4 to 6 hours differences depending on the time of year. And then once I came to Brazil to start the company, then it was about a year and some where we were half-time on it because we were contracting. And so, all of that stuff, I think it did give us time to learn. It was my first development project. I hadn't programmed before. Like I said, I come from like a game design and an art background. And so it gave me enough time to learn, and Corona was awesome for that because it really kind of lets you kind of get results a bit quicker. And then it lets you sort of learn and polish your coding style and everything you learn how to do in Lua. You kind of learn over time, and you're not immediately faced with like this giant wall of complexity, and so I think it gave us a lot of time to learn and polish. At the end of the day, I think Davi had a lot of time to polish the art and to really find a good art style, and I think it shows.
I've got 2 questions.
Go ahead, Ed.
One of my questions is, you touched on this. It sounded like you said that due to the fact that your game is linear in nature, level to level is the only way to advance, that sometimes users were blocked and say, okay, I'm done because I don't like this level, or I can't figure out this level. So are you thinking about changing it to a non-linear progression, like branching or optional bypassing?
Yeah, we are. We've already kind of set the design for it. So what we're doing is, because we want to preserve the levels we already made, but we also see the flaws in sort of, in hindsight, everything is a lot clearer, obviously. So, sure. We've noticed, for example, that for new people playing, not people that have been playing levels or have been advancing to other worlds, but in the first world, it takes a while to see new content, right? You're learning about the game, and there's a lot of impatient people on mobile. They want to see things right away. Yeah. So we need to get you into like the thick of things a bit quicker. That was one lesson learned. But we obviously don't want to make it too hard, or else we're going to frustrate everybody. Right. And in the nature of our game, where like one movement and you can make a mistake that will make you want to restart an entire level, it can get frustrating, right? I mean, it's fun and it's definitely gratifying when you figure things out, but it can get frustrating. We're well aware of that. So if you're frustrated with a level, we don't offer you anything else. And I think that's something that we owe the user because we know that we might frustrate them. And so that's something that we're doing now, is creating, like instead of having one sequence of levels, you're going to have a few, and each sequence will lead you to an artifact. These will be called like treasure hunts. And you'll have something else which is a little more casual to do in between these treasure hunts or just whenever, which will be pretty cool, and it's something that we're working on. I'm not going to say anything yet because we got to make sure it works first.
Yeah, no, don't do that. And then actually the last one wasn't really a question, but a suggestion based on something here on the show told me. Editors. Have you considered enabling an editor to let people create their own levels?
Right. Yeah, we totally could.
You can just say, hey, I don't want to talk about it.
No. I mean, we actually use Tiled right now to as a level editor. So it all exports as JSON. So it'd be really easy for us to set up something like a web service to control that and to distribute levels. It's a good idea. I mean, it's definitely like another app, and like we'd have to build a level editor app, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely understand. There's a challenge there. I'm just raising the idea, so as if you didn't have enough on your plate.
Yeah, no, actually, it's something that makes a lot more sense if you have an advertising, monetization model as opposed to a level pack monetization model, right? So it would definitely work a lot better in the direction we're headed. But we're also doing some things that could be very interesting. In terms of the level, question.
Don't share if you're not ready, though.
Not ready.
I understand the urge to do so, so I'm helping you not. Don't do it.
Thank you.
What does your level design process look like?
So usually what happens is we come up with mechanics that we're going to have in the game, and we sort of distribute them by world, and usually we have a focus. So in our game, the first world is a world that easily will teach you about the logic behind the game. And so there's not a whole lot of things that really demand action and timing from you. Like you won't have to jump off of things that are breaking in midair and all of that. The second world is that. The second world is the action component coming in strong. So we have a lot of things that, there's a plank that breaks when you step on it. There's dynamite that explodes in a chain reaction. A lot of things that force you to act even when maybe you're not ready because you haven't thought it through, right? You have to think on the fly. The third world goes back a bit to the logic style, and then the fourth world goes really big into the action and makes it really tough. There's a lot of things that kill you. So we start out that way. We sort of plot out the game design at a high level, and then in the level design itself, every level ideally should have like a personality. Like we don't name them, but they should have names, and the name should be interesting because it's doing something different. So there's levels, where you learn about ice, and ice will cause you to slip and slide. You make one move, and it'll take you to the end of the ice path. And so you learn about that, and then you do the logic. And then we put like an enemy on the ice, and he slides as well. And so all of a sudden it turns into like a chase where you have to keep moving fast because now there's an enemy that's just doing his thing, but he's doing it on ice, and it's causing him to slip and naturally chase after you. And so every level has like a purpose and has an idea behind it, and then we just try to build all the puzzles around that to keep a certain level of consistency.
Is it all kind of based around an idea of a storyline, or are you just sort of coming up with these ideas and want to be able to put them together?
I think the idea is we just come up with anything that could be fun and would work well as far as mechanically in the game, and then we kind of wrap a really light, exposition to each of the mechanics. We were thinking about doing heavier story earlier on in the project, but we found that it's a casual game, so let's just do enough to make the characters approachable and to make them fun, and then the rest is going to be just hints and you get to imagine the rest.
I don't know if you guys watch VGA High School. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Well, it's on YouTube, but it's also on Netflix, and there's it's Video Game High School, and everybody goes there to learn how to be expert video game players and all this other stuff. And anyway, so in one of the episodes in season 3, they have to go on this quest to get the sword for a friend for this guy's friend because he needs it so that one of the school candidates for class president or whatever can win their competition. Anyway, they're in the quest, so they're actually like in game, which is the way they present it is kind of fun because they're all dressed up and going through the quest. And at some point, there's one of the characters, the in-game character, who's kind of like giving you the quest dialogue, all the here's what you need to know in order to do the quest, and before you go, blah blah. And one of the main characters is like skip, skip. You know, I mean, he's like, you know, there's a point where you're right. You're like, you don't want to be that involved in the game. You just want to play it.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to make that easy. You know, for example, we observed a lot of people. If you're in a level that has a tutorial, there's a little dog. He's the character's companion, and he sort of explains everything to you. So you run into him, and he'll explain, and there's a really brief dialogue. And then, you know, people would go up on ahead, and then they would die, or they would miss a chest or something, and they would hit retry, and then you'd have to go through the dialogue again. So we saw people like spamming, you know, oh, let's get through this. Come on, I've seen this already. And so like one of the little things is every time you hit retry, if you've already talked to the dog, then he won't be there. When you hit retry. But obviously he'll be there if you leave the level and come back, just in case someone else is playing or whatever the case is.
That's good stuff.
That's a good idea. You said something that caught my attention. You said we saw people spamming, so you must be using Flurry or something to track analytics?
Yeah, we are using Flurry, but we actually didn't track that there. We noticed when we went to it's called Brazil Game Show. It's almost like an E3 for Brazil. Playtesting? Yeah, so it's huge. There was like 250,000 people in this Brazil Game Show, and we managed to get a little booth set up in the corner. And it was like, you know, it was a tiny little space, but at least we got people coming by, and we just watch everybody play. And it was quite fun, actually, because, you know, some parents would bring their kid, and the kid would immediately grab an iPad and start playing, and then we'd hand one to the mom and one to the dad and be like, you guys try too, you know. We want to watch everybody play. So
it's a family thing. That's a good idea. But I want to re-point out what you said there, because that's one of the challenges I've had, is you want to give somebody a tutorial, you want to teach them, but at the same time you don't want to keep spamming them with the same information you just told them because they couldn't do it twice or 3 times. So that's smart.
And there's a tendency too. We do a lot in level design to teach things, just because I think, you know, there's a tendency to treat everybody like they're stupid because, you know, you don't want to lose anybody who might not understand, even if they're the exception. But at the same time, if people don't understand, then it's your fault. So you sort of can't really gamble that. You know, you have to make sure the game is well explained. So we did a combination. Like we have text, we have video, and then we have level design. And some of the level design is done in such a way where you're going to learn by doing. You know, and so if there's anything you need to see and it'll kill you if you don't see it first, then we put a little video and we show you. But other than that, we try to get it in the level and just sort of use the dog to point out that there's something new that you should watch.
I want to thank you for that, by the way. Your videos inspired me to do the same thing in one of my recent product attempts, which has not yet been released. But I put little videos in there for certain failure cases.
Awesome. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
For more difficult levels, do you do anything deliberate to increase the challenge? Or do you start with a solution and work backward to try to set up the level into a certain way?
Yeah, so each level you can earn up to 3 stars and then a crown. And the way that works is there's 3 chests that you have to collect for the stars. And the crown is if you've collected all the gold in the level as well. So what we end up usually doing is planning out 3 puzzles per level. And then each of the gold components is like a little, either it's a hint as to the I guess the best path you can take. Like if we want you to jump to the other side so that you're on the right side to start a puzzle, we'll put some gold in the way, and that'll naturally bring you over. So it doesn't always feel 100% forced. But what ends up happening is we usually plan 3 puzzles per level, and a lot of times we work backwards. So we'll start up with this will be a puzzle with boulders and with bats. So we set up sort of where the player has to go, how he gets the chest, and then we work backwards to plan out the paths of everything. And oftentimes there's a lot of action stuff that's just, we'd really like it if this was a challenge to kind of dash through here and do everything at the right time, and then we just play test until it works.
Okay. Any other pointed questions? Like specific things?
I got one for our contracting, but I want to leave it for our contracting discussion.
Okay. Well, let's move into that, and then we can continue on to discuss the app if it comes up. So last time we left our conversation on consulting, it was really, like I said, we were talking about how do you get clients, or how do you invoice them. So more of the administrative conversations and stuff like that. So in this one, we were going to start out with working with clients and doing war stories and stuff like that. So where we left off was the question of how do you communicate with clients and how often. Now I know Ed has very specific views on this, but anyone on the panel have something they want to share around that? Ed?
Communication is the key factor for doing any type of consulting. We have to have solid communication with the client, or the client's going to get frustrated, you're going to get frustrated. It is all about the conversation that occurs. So regular communication is needed, but you've got to do it on your terms. That it's a careful balance. If they're not hearing from you, they think nothing's happening. But at the same time, you can't be constantly communicating with them to such a point that you're not getting anything else done. So it is a very careful balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, some clients want to meet like once a week or once every 2 weeks, and there's a point there where you're like, well.
And I prefer once every 2 weeks, but with emails in between. I'll Skype once every 2 weeks. I don't like to go more often than that, because Skyping does take up a lot of your time. Whereas I can send out an email that takes me 10 minutes to do. Skype meetings seem to go on forever.
Yeah. I hate talking over Skype, and I keep Skype turned off for the majority of the time.
So if I heard you correctly, Sergey, you limit your client's ability to access you out of the blue by keeping Skype off.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. Email is the preferable way of conversation.
Yeah. So I want to go back to what Brian just said. You said you like to communicate every 2 weeks. I typically like to communicate
by Skype.
No more than once a week.
By Skype.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Start again. I don't mean offline communications. I mean direct communications via Skype or whatever method you've chosen to.
And of course, I'm referring to large projects that are going to be going on for multiple weeks of work. Short projects, hopefully just crank it out, get it done, and move on.
Okay. What about you, Sergey? How often do you meet, actually speak, Skype, whatever, with your clients?
Well, usually if they insist on. So if they insist, I do. If they don't, I don't. And another point against Skype is that whatever you say on Skype is not recorded. So if you agree on something on Skype and then you find out later they thought something else, you can't prove your words because it's not recorded. While if it have been emails, you would have exactly what they said.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I do tell my clients not just that there's nothing that we're going to agree upon in Skype that is fixed. It's got to be sent via email or some other.
Yeah, I find that every Skype meeting inevitably ends with an email as well, or else, like Sergey said, you just lose track of what was agreed upon.
Yeah.
What about clients that are the opposite? The ones that they're hard to get a hold of. How do you guys handle those?
I've never had a client that didn't want to talk.
Oh. Yeah, that's never been a problem.
I find that they fall into different classes, and one class of client is they're very adamant about you getting whatever it is that you're supposed to get done. But then when you will go and ask them for something, they will tend to come back and you'll have to follow with a couple of times, and then when they finally get to you, it's, let's say it's gone a couple of weeks, and they finally get back to you on what they're supposed to do, and then they expect a result to be within a couple of days of them providing whatever it took them 2 weeks to get you. So
yeah,
they're not all like that.
I treat those clients like my students. If they're slow to turn stuff in, I'm slow to grade.
Yeah, that's stressful though. I hear what you're saying, Charles. Generally, those kind of clients don't pass my first communication test.
Right.
And then I don't accept them. But it's not always true. For example, one thing that has happened to me is I've had a client where I start off working with one person, everything's good, and then they change who I work with, and then it does not go well. So and how one deals with that.
Contact?
Yeah, well, a different person on the team is taking over communications and delivery of items that I need to do the work, and it just falls apart. So, yeah, and I don't have a good way of dealing with that yet. Anybody?
It's tough. I guess as a as someone who's getting hired for contract, you need to always make sure that the ball is on the other side of the court. Just because I guess you don't want people pointing fingers at you. I mean, Davi and I, we were doing contract for such a long time. We've had moments where, we had to work with a back-end team, and there was just not enough communication. And so, at certain times, it's like, okay, well, it's not working. What's going on? And because of the lack of communication, things got confused. And then that was always awkward and uncomfortable. So we learned that, it's always good to sort of keep the communication line open and make sure that everybody's well aware of what's going on. I think that's sort of the best way to approach it, because then especially when you have that history of emails, you sort of protect yourself from anything.
Yeah, but it's very hard to explain to a client though why they're wrong. Even when you have it documented.
If you have a big team, many people working on one application, it's wise to set up something like Slack, where you communicate in IRC-like matter, but everything gets saved like emails.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about that. Not IRC necessarily, but part of the question here earlier was where Charles alluded to me having specific opinions. One thing that I've encountered working with different clients is all the different clients I've worked with seem to want to do things differently. Some want to use Dropbox, some want to use Box. They have like different ways they want to give you the information. I try to force my clients to use the method that I prefer first, so I nicely encourage them to do so. But at the end of the day, I always try to limit the avenues for data to come in. So yes, we'll Skype to have our meetings, but emails for delivering documents, or we're going to use a fixed GitHub to deliver documents, or we're going to do something that we agree upon, so it's always the same way. I've had clients in the past that sometimes they want to use Dropbox, and the next week they want to change to use something else, and I can never find all the content. FTP this week, like, oh, okay, no, this is not working, because I don't know what the latest content is. I don't know who emailed me last or who updated these documents last. It gets a little bit out of control.
When I get a big project, I set up a folder at a special place on Google Drive for this specific project, and if it has many links, I usually put all the links in some files that I can access from, and like Bitbucket, like GitHub, like, I don't know, emails, login passwords for iTunes and other stuff. That's the most important stuff. Usually you have to search through emails to get back to them, but once they are all in one place, in one file, it's much easier to work.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to the next question here, and it says, has a client ever asked you to do something that you couldn't do in Corona, and how did you handle it? So that assumes a little bit of that everybody here has done their contract work in Corona, but let's just say, has a client have ever asked you to do something outside of your comfort zone? So like if you're like, they want you to do something in iOS specifically, in Objective-C, and you're like, well, I'm not an Objective-C developer. So how do you handle that?
Well, I guess I can share an opinion. I mean, I think you have to be very deliberate in what you choose to work on, and you have to be very honest with your clients, because it's always going to come through during the work or down the road or whatever, if you're not ready to handle something or do something else. We've definitely had clients request. We were with one group for a significant amount of time, and we were sort of their prototyping lab. They weren't fixed on a product yet, but they wanted to try ideas out, and they wanted to test and prototype usability design and all that. So we were able to use Corona and there were things that we just had to tell them, like, we can't actually test this. And then, funny enough, a lot of times these features would get added to Corona, and we'd be like, okay, yeah, now we can do this. It's okay.
Yeah, I've had that exact experience. They've said, hey, can you put this in? I said, no, Corona doesn't support it. Next week it does. I'm like, oh, hey, it supports it now.
I had another experience. I come from web development, like PHP, MySQL, and other stuff, and my clients see that, and sometimes they offer me some work similar to that, like websites and backends. But I tell them that I quit my job because I liked game development much more, and I don't want to go back to that area, and I will be more efficient if I were doing only games. So that's usually what I tell them. About what Corona can't handle, I talk about Corona Enterprise, if they can afford it, if they can use it, and if it's applicable, and if I'm good enough at Objective-C to implement it. Usually it's something like making a plugin for something. So that's okay. But if it's something complicated, like building user interface with custom stuff and other stuff, I say, no, you have to find somebody else for this task.
What do you guys feel about sourcing others? So Sergey, you just mentioned, that you can do web development, but it's not your preference. So, but you still have a skill set there that you could leverage by managing the project for someone else. So if someone else is the resource and then you're just the project manager, have you guys ever done any of that? How does the panel feel about kind of outsourcing the work to someone else and then just becoming the project manager?
In my particular case, because I have so many students that are learning mobile app development and are interested in becoming professional developers, I regularly bring on interns or student assistants to help me with projects, and I feel like that's part of their vacation or their education, but I also make it very clear that it's usually done over their vacation, so it's part of their education. I also make it very clear to any clients that I have that I am using students and to help with the development of the app. But in the final stages, it's my name that goes on the development. So I do closely look over everything that is developed.
Yeah, and that's an important point, is to be able to back it up. At the end of the day, if your resource doesn't come through, you could still step in and do the work yourself. But Ed, what were you going to say?
I was gonna give Brian a bad time.
Well, and I do ask Ed regularly questions on if I get stuck on something. I will not hesitate to ask members on the panel to, hey, how are you dealing with this problem? And Ed's great about responding pretty quick.
Charles, are you talking about hiding behind other developers? So like you're getting a client and you say, hey, it's me alone, but instead you're giving work to somebody else. Talking about that?
Yeah, basically. I don't know how to call it hiding behind other developers, but yeah, you're outsourcing the work to other developers. So you are the studio, you're like the studio, you're the whatever, and then you.
Yeah, for me, I think it's quite hard to find a good developer and for a good rate. So it would be like profitable and reasonable. And another thing, I don't like to be responsible for others' work. So usually, if I see somebody else's work, I usually find something that I don't like about it, and I don't like that feeling. But managing other people is okay. So if a client already has other developers working on, I can take over and control them. It's not a big issue.
Yeah. Well, I do take on web development projects, and when there's a design element to it or whatever, I'm not a designer, and so I will then send that off to someone, and they'll do the work, and then I'll get it back, and then it'll be my job or somebody else's job, depending on how the project goes, to implement that. So somebody told me a long time ago that you never say no. You either raise your rates or you outsource it to somebody else, but you just never say no.
That's actually. That saying no before you've actually heard it out or you've explored your options is kind of like folding in poker before the bet's been raised. It's like just because you don't like your cards, you don't have to fold right away. You can stay in for the first round at least, the blind. I find it's the same way. And I do think that there is a challenge when you're outsourcing to other people because you're still responsible. It's everything's going through you, and so at the end of the day, you're responsible for other people's work. And if for some reason that doesn't go down or that doesn't work out very well for you, you'll have to own up to that, right? Like that was your responsibility. So I think it's very important just to have people you trust or people you've worked with before. And if you don't know anybody, maybe try on small projects. Like try to collaborate on something smaller as opposed to bigger.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You should never you should never jump right into it, and do small projects. Give even the virtual assistant or the developer, whoever that you're working with, you give them small tasks so that you can build a relationship with them and then trust ultimately. So good advice.
I think part of being a successful developer is that you do need to be part of a community. Here on Corona Geek, we're constantly bouncing ideas and concepts off of each other to make our apps better. It's the steel sharpening steel metaphor that we're going for becoming exceptional in what we do. And you'll hear the conversation quite often that Ed will give Sergey a hard time about giving comments back on his code and back and forth that, hey, that you completely rewrote what I've done, and I've sent things that I was struggling with to Ed and other people on the panel, and they've gone, no, let's do it this way, and it was a better concept than what I had and dramatically improved my code. It's a good thing to have a community that you're part of, even if you're an independent developer.
Well, let's talk about some war stories here real quick before we run out of time. So, have you ever had a client drop you, or you have? Well, let's start off with. Have you ever had to drop a client, and how did you handle it?
Yes.
Yeah, Ed. Yes. And how did you handle it? Ed?
Okay, I'll just start. I've had to drop one client. I had a client that dallied on a project for so long that Corona had transitioned from graphics 1 to 2, and the tools we relied upon were dead. How did I handle it?
Yeah.
As best I could. Honestly, I still feel terrible really badly about the whole thing. But at the end of the day, I just had to explain that we are beyond the point where we can continue to do development this way. We either have to start over or give up. Sergey, anybody?
I had one case in my early days of developing. It was one of my first clients. I've got a job, but it was unexpectedly complex. So I got it for a little amount of money to be developed, a fixed amount of money. But later on, development goes on. It's going to be more complicated and more complicated, and I cannot work on it anymore for this amount of money. So we ended up transferring all my work to some other studio in India, and they are either still working on it or it's done. I'm not sure.
Let me ask you a specific question about that. When you decided that you were going to do the transfer, was there a period where you said, hey, I've got to do this transfer, but I still want you to pay me to do the work to prep it? There must have been some prep work to do that transfer. Did you
it was
on that, or?
It was no extra charge.
Okay, so you took that out of your
client paid what we agreed on initially, and that was it. Okay. So I didn't give money back, and I didn't charge anymore.
Okay.
Was just to maybe clarify the question? I don't know if that really answered what Ed was after, but the time that you spent transitioning out of the project, was that sort of included in the payments you in what they had contracted you, or was that something that once your contract ended and once you guys ended the contract, then you spent that time to help them?
No, it's different. So we had a project going on. but it turns out to be much complicated than I thought initially, and that it was described initially. And the money were for the entire project to be made by myself, but it didn't turn out to be so, and we decided to transfer. Is it clear?
Mm-hmm. And was that time that you spent transferring, was that your own time or paid time, or?
It was fixed price, so it wasn't our rate, so it was only one-time payment from initial state.
Okay. And the transfer, when you did it, did you end up having to spend more time discussing with the folks you transferred to, or did you just say, hey, here it is?
Yeah, I had a Skype call for about an hour explaining the code to the people there.
Okay, that's pretty straightforward then.
Yeah.
All right.
It's not too bad. Okay, and then have you ever had someone drop you?
Well, it's usual business in freelancing. It's not like dropping, but it's sometime it was stupid by my side, like as it was a client who said, hey, I needed this game very quick, I will pay you next day a lot of money. Like, and this is a very simple game to make. I said, yeah, it is simple, I can spend one night and get it done. I spend one night, I get it done, and he doesn't pay. So
thankfully, that's a short investment.
But yeah, it's short. I never take such risks. That's bigger steps. And sometimes we start a project, but with time, clients lose interest in it, or something else happens, and the project stops.
So personally, I've had to let a few clients go just because, for various reasons, just because time constraints and stuff like that. But I've learned, like Ed was saying, I've learned to vet people right up front. Make sure that I know who I'm working with, so that there's not really that much of an issue. I mean, if they run out of money or they decide not to pursue the project or something like that, you can never foresee those types of things. But nobody's saying, hey, we're unsatisfied with your quality of work.
For a while.
Go ahead.
Okay, for a while, my team, we were doing maintenance work for somebody's project. So basically, we were taking their bug list and eliminating bugs, and it was working, but everybody on the team got allocated to it, and it was just taking a lot of resources from the main project. So we both kind of agreed to cut that one.
Yeah, I've never been dropped, but I've had clients go MIA twice. I don't know how Sergey managed to never get bitten by this, but I charge every 2 weeks, and the clients sometimes lag on the payment, so we can get as far as a month out. And I had a client go a month out and then disappear.
Well, as I told before, I work on Odesk, and it's automatic, so I don't worry about that.
That's right, forgot. Protected by Odesk.
Yes.
Yeah,
Nice.
I included in my personal contracts a project going dead clause. Whether that's usually it's the client or the person that I'm subcontracting to might disappear. I've had the problem before when I'm doing language translations of my book, that the person that I contracted to do that translation disappears, and that's, I just wrote into all contracts now, if something goes dead, then it's dead. They're required to delete all files, and gives me legal protection then for going forward, and I can seek out somebody else to do that translation.
That sounds like that kind of goes back to the conversation about centralizing your communications and making sure that you have copies of things, because if you don't want to lose whatever work that you've paid for.
Right.
Hey, people, who do you set the owner of the code you write, and what license do you use for the code?
Anybody got any thoughts there?
I retain all the code in my own private Gits, so I own everything basically, in a sense, that as I keep control of the data that is the project, the code, the assets, everything. But in the contracts that I work with, it all belongs to them after they paid me.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But that's all written.
You can't use your own code after you gave it to them.
Right. And I always tell clients that I'm right up front that I'm working on many projects at a time. There will be overlaps between what they're doing and what other projects that I'm working on, and I will, I reuse code. If I've got a routine that handles, connecting to the contacts, I'm going to cut and paste that code between applications. That's my content.
Mm-hmm. Now, I include a clause that says learnings and such I'm allowed to retain and use across projects.
An easy solution would be to declare all your code as MIT license. So it basically means do whatever you want with the code. So I can reuse it.
It's always kind of tricky because we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about the contract with the client, and we're talking about the license in your code as it is shared and displayed.
Yes, we're talking about the code itself, the license as a code.
Yeah.
Yeah, but oftentimes I think there's a lot of usually most contracts they'll demand to have ownership of everything you create in the end. If you're being outsourced to develop an app or something, they'll want ownership of everything. Especially, I would imagine, for development, because if they need to do any maintenance, they don't want to sort of be tied down to always resorting to the same person, and then they might not have access. So as a contractor, it would make a lot of sense for me to establish a clause in the contract where we retain the rights to whatever we're buying, essentially.
So I want to, Daniel, I'm going to pick on you for just a second, and then we kind of need to wrap things up. But since we're talking about licensing, we're talking about ownership and all that kind of stuff like that, how does that work for DigiTen? How do you guys have that structured so that you collaborate on your work, and then you're creating this thing at the end, but you're still individuals? Who has ownership of that? How did you guys decide to structure that?
Between Davi and I, you mean for the studio?
Yeah, I guess it's just, you're still two individuals coming together to collaborate. How is it structured?
So you'll have to forgive me because as far as like studio or laws and companies and stuff,
Sure.
We did it in Brazil, so I might not know the right terms in English and to how it applies legally in the States. But I think we're like a limited liability company or something, and we each own 50% of DigiTen and everything produced by DigiTen. And then we were friends for quite some time before we actually started the studio. So there's a lot of trust between Davi and I, and so our contract wasn't too insane. We can pretty much handle anything that happens between us. But essentially, we can both sign for the company. We both retain 50% of it, and that's it. Okay.
So did you guys write in any particular exit clauses or anything like that? How you would break things up if you needed to, or is that you just?
No, actually, that's still lacking from the company contract. We haven't actually thought about that yet. It's important, and it's definitely not something that you think about too much when everything is nice and happy. But if it ever goes wrong, then that's when you wish you had done it before, right? So we're actually very aware that we need to kind of wrap that up and put something in the contract about that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because anytime you're collaborating, I'll always think about ownership of things. When you're an indie working on your own stuff, obviously you own your own stuff, and then like we were just saying, if somebody want to pay you for contracting, they're gonna want to own it. When you're collaborating together as a team, especially as a two-man team, those kinds of things get blurry. So just wanted to see what you guys had in store. So. All right. Well, I think we.
Can I say one thing, Charles?
Yeah. Go ahead, Ed.
Round out what we said here. We've talked a lot about advice. We've each given advice, but none of us is a lawyer. I don't think any of us is a lawyer, and we all laugh. But I wanted to point out that as much as I personally hate dealing with lawyers, and I'm not sure where you all feel about how you feel about that, it never hurts to employ a lawyer the further down the road you get with any large contract or a collaboration with somebody. You're better off having somebody who knows the law and knows how to deal with these contracts do the work instead of trying to figure it out on your own.
Outsource it.
Sergey?
It's a useful tip. I know if you get a contract with somebody, you can send it this contract for some lawyer for review, and it will cost you, I don't know, about $50 or $100, and he will point out everything what's important about that.
Mm-hmm. So you guys agreed on that? Daniel,
absolutely agree. Yeah, Ed, absolutely agree. I think it's, and it fits really well into today's, topic, because we're talking about outsourcing and contracting. Outsource all the legal things your company has to do. You don't want to have a full-time lawyer. You don't need it, but obviously you're gonna, every once in a while, you're gonna run into something that needs a contract and needs this or that, and then it's always ideal to have somebody know what they're talking about and sort of protect you. So.
Well, there you go.
Protect.
Yeah, definitely. That's good advice, Ed. Thanks for bringing that up. And yeah, I think you guys think what, like, is LegalZoom or some kind of one of those sites? Anybody ever tried those?
Not sure.
No. Maybe just your local lawyers. Slip them a 10.
We have a agreement with. We're part of a. How do you call it? We pay a certain fee every year to get access to lawyers for various things, and so we can use a certain number of hours for reviewing documents, etc.
You have free range lawyers.
Free range.
Like a co-op.
I can't remember the name of it right now. My wife deals with this, and basically it is like I said. We pay a certain amount every year, and then we get to use their services up to a certain amount to do whatever we need.
That sounds like a great developer thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You pay me a bunch of money up front, and then you get a certain number of hours from me, and yeah.
Or not.
Or not.
Give me the money.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for being here. I think we're going to wrap it up. We're a little bit over today's schedule, but that's advice on consulting. So if you didn't get a chance to go check out show 137, definitely go do that, and be sure to go check out DigiTen.com. So DIGITEN.com, and go download Dig Away and play it. So. So basically so Daniel and Davi can retire. That's really what it's all about.
It's a free download. You get to play quite a lot for free. So check it out.
Yeah, absolutely, and pass it around, to your friends. Don't just keep it all to yourself. Share it.
Yes.
Share it with others. Share. Be social. All right, guys. Thanks for being here. We'll be back here next Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific, talking all about mobile app development using Chrome SDK. Until then, have a great week and happy coding.
Bye.